All right, guys. So one thing I wanted to go over with you guys, and we didn't really get a chance to do this in class, and I kind of made the promise to you guys, and I kind of made the promise to myself that if we didn't talk about it in class, and it's not something that we have worked on in class, not an example that I've given you, I wouldn't make you guys do it, typically speaking, right? So one thing that you're going to see on every single one of your homework assignments is you're going to see these Tableau problems. Okay, and these are the data analytics problems. These are what we're going to do to kind of analyze, how a company is performing. We're going to make decisions based on the information that we see. We're going to treat these as though we're not the accountant. Maybe we're the manager. Maybe we're somebody who works in a marketing department. Maybe we're an investor or a lender. We're one of those interested third parties that the measurements that have been recorded are being communicated to, right? So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this Tableau example. Now, I believe that this is exactly what you guys have on your homework, so we can walk through it together. They're set up very nicely, in my opinion. They're pretty easy once we get into it, and you're not so intimidated by what you're looking at right here, because some of you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I really don't have much idea what I'm looking at. And that's okay. That's what these are for. We're going to learn. We're going to start to learn how to analyze the information that has been communicated to us as interested third parties, right? Like I said, I want you guys to be, savvy users of accounting information by the time we leave this class. So when you open it up, this homework up, you're going to see you have brief, usually brief, sometimes they may be a little longer, but usually they're pretty brief description, or what I call a fact pattern, right? So in this one, it tells us that we've been hired by First National Bank as an assistant loan officer. Part of what our work involves assessing which companies should be allowed to borrow money from the bank. This is something we've talked about in class, right? Banks looking at the information communicated to them and deciding whether or not they want to loan them money. In this situation, that is exactly what we're doing. So the bank wants to lend money to all companies that will likely have resources available at the time the loan obligation becomes due. Now, if we think back to one of the underlying characteristics, one of the assumptions that we make in accounting is that the entity is what we call a going concern, right? And that's what the bank is looking at here. Are they going to have enough resources to cover the liability? If they don't, then they're not a going concern. If they're not a going concern, we don't want to lend them money, right? So during the current week, 3 companies have approached you about obtaining a 2-year loan. For each of these companies, you ask to see their balance sheets, so assets, liabilities, and equity over the previous 6 years. Your analysis of the company's assets and liabilities are provided in the graphs below. Examine those graphs and answer the following questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the graphs that were provided here, and they give you a link if you do want to see them in a different way. You can click on that link. These are fine. As we get into more detailed Tableau assignments, you're going to have instances where you might want to pop these out to a different window or look at each of them separately. But right now, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward set of graphical information. It's simply presenting the company's assets and liabilities over a 6-year period for each of the 3 companies. Okay, so question 1 down here, we see the required questions we must answer. So reported amounts for assets for company A over the 6-year period is what? So is it asking us what is the total, or is it asking us what is happening with them? Well, if we look at the drop-down box, we can see, it's simply just asking us, are those assets increasing? Are they decreasing? Have they remained flat? Have they remained the same over the course of the past 6 years? Well, just looking at the graph, we can tell that their assets in company A over the last 6 years have gone up. So they're increasing, right? Reported amount of liabilities. Now remember, we're looking at liabilities now. Green is assets, red is liabilities. So amount of liabilities for company B. Again, you always want to pay attention to the details. And I'm going to tell you guys this a lot as we go through this class. You want to look at the details of what's being asked of you in these questions. So we're looking at liabilities for company B. What is happening to those liabilities? Well, the liabilities are red. This is company B's balance sheet. We can see that they have remained flat. Okay? So that would tell us that they are remaining the same. Now they're going to ask us something we don't necessarily need these graphs for, but this is something that we need to know. And this is going to go back to your fundamental accounting equation, right? So what they're going to ask us here is the difference between total assets and total liabilities is referred to as what? Let's think about it. Let's look at our fundamental accounting equation, okay? So we know our fundamental accounting equation is A equals L plus E. What they're asking us is, what does A minus L equal? Well, it equals E, right? So just rearranging that, we can see that we're going to call that stockholders' equity, right? We know it's not net cash flows. This has nothing to do with cash. It's not net income, because net income is revenues less expenses. And it's not total revenues, because total revenues is simply the amounts that you recognize for providing goods or services. So we know it's stockholders' equity. Also, we know it's stockholders' equity because we did this fun little experiment right here, right? So number 4, which company's trends in assets and liabilities suggest the highest likelihood of bankruptcy in year 7? So we don't really know much outside of these companies except for their assets. And we can look at company A. Well, their assets are going up. Looks like they're probably, the difference here tells us they probably got enough to cover liabilities. Company B's assets are dropping. So the difference right here tells us they probably don't have enough to cover their liabilities in the future. We're probably definitely not lending money to Company B. And Company C, their assets, again, they're going up, right? They got nowhere to go but up here, telling us they've probably got enough assets, enough resources to cover their liabilities or what they owe, right? So we know that Company B, that graph right here suggests that they've got that, not that they will, but that they've got the highest likelihood of these 3 of going bankrupt in year 7. Okay. Now we're going to calculate stockholders' equity for each company in year 6. Okay. So what do we need to know to calculate equity? They don't give it to us. We've got to calculate it, right? Well, what do we know? What do we know about equity? Well, we know that equity, right, is assets minus liabilities equals equity. Or conversely, we could say assets equal liabilities plus equity, right? So we know those things. We could use these in what we know to solve, okay? So what I would recommend doing is just that. So we'll go with Company A. And let's see, what are Company A's figures? Well, we have $100,000 in assets and $75,000 in liabilities. Sorry, I'm writing this down as we do this. See, everybody should be writing this down. So we want A minus L equals E. In this case, we know that 100,000, and I'm going to shorten these, minus 75,000 equals our equity. So we know that equity in this case should be $25,000. And I'll even, since I yelled at you guys about it, write it up here in thousands, because we always need to label our data consistently and accurately. So we know that now these are in thousands, right? So that is how I come up with the 25,000 for Company A. That is our equity. Don't forget that I put it in thousands, right? But I need to make sure that it's in thousands when I get to the answer in Tableau. Okay. So Company B, now we've got kind of a similar situation. Their assets are 50,000 and their liabilities are 75,000. So now we are going to find their stockholders' equity. So how are we going to do that? We're going to start the exact same way. A minus L equals E. We're going to say this is in thousands. Okay. So their assets were 50,000. Their liabilities were 75,000. Uh-oh, that's going to cause a problem, right? They currently have negative 25,000 in equity. Not great. Not a good thing. So negative 25,000, and you'll notice right here that it says negative amounts should be indicated by a minus sign. I mentioned this in class briefly, that sometimes it'll tell you to put them in parentheses. Most of the time in your Connect homework, it's going to ask you to use a negative sign, and then they will just update it like they did here with parentheses. So let's do company C. Hopefully by now you guys are kind of seeing how this works. We have $100,000 in assets, and we have $70,000 in liabilities. So again, we'll go back to the drawing board. I'm going to leave the in thousands on there because I'm tired of writing it, quite frankly. So once again, we've got assets minus liabilities equals equity. We know two of the three things that we need to know to plug in these numbers. We know that assets are $100,000. We know that their liabilities are $70,000. That tells us with simple math that our equity equals $30,000 for company C. Now, one thing you can do, and I have limited the number of times you can do this, but you can hit check my work and we can see, am I correct? We can see here that the answer is complete and correct. Sometimes you will see that it's not complete and correct and you need to go back and fix those. You should be able to get hints and things like that. Like I said, there are videos that can walk you through these problems. They're very useful videos. I am always available to help you guys. The GAs are always available to help tutor you guys. You have plenty of resources to get the help when you need it. You've just got to ask. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully now you can see why these Tableau assignments are going to be very beneficial for us when we're trying to analyze the information that is communicated to us, as well as when we're making decisions.